Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Human Rights Magazine. In this episode of the Pathways to Peace series, I spoke with Livingston Sewanyana, the UN independent expert on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order, the founder and executive director of the Foundation for Human Rights Initiative in Uganda. He's a lawyer with extensive scholarly background in human rights, governance, and access to justice. To begin our conversation, I asked him his thoughts on what determines a condition of peace.
Derek, to me, peace, of course, conventionally is the absence of war. But my understanding of peace is broad. It is all about ensuring harmony among people, within people, among societies, and between countries, and globally, of harmony within and among community level, family level, societal level, national level, regional level, and globally.
How then can we proceed to achieve peace? What are the avenues that are open to us if we want to pursue a pathway to peace?
I think the avenues include good governance, leadership, good leadership. We need leadership that is sensitive to the aspirations of humankind, the aspirations of people. Leadership that is responsive to the needs and demands of everyone. Leadership that's accountable. Leadership that works towards sustainable peace improvement. So the first important player or factor is leadership. The other important factor is we need to cooperate across the world. That's the very essence of the United Nations, that there will be cooperation among people, among nations, among societies. There must be cooperation, and that can take different forms: technical assistance, support, international cooperation, of course, peace-building efforts. All this would help in, of course, promoting peace. But beyond that, there have been several standards agreed upon, human rights standards, across globally, covering a range of issues, including rights of children, women, disabled persons, refugees. So there is need for commitment across nations and implement these internationally accepted standards. That's important. Then beyond that, we also need to denounce war. We need to denounce war because war definitely is a major player here. That means there must be an understanding across nations for peace-building efforts. We need to convince nations that they need to live and collaborate and work together. So that is also important, denouncing war. But we also need to commit ourselves to working together within the United Nations. One of the challenges we face today, Derek, is the unilateralism of countries. Many countries want to work unilaterally and impose decisions sometimes that harm other nations. They engage in processes that lead to loss of lives and destruction of property. We need to embrace multilateralism because that is important for us to achieve global peace. There must be a commitment towards multilateralism. For example, with the advent of COVID-19, there has been a sense of vaccine nationalism, where some countries felt the only way they would deal with the pandemic is by ensuring universal vaccination of their people. Yet we all know that we are an interconnected world. People are traveling, they move from place to place. And unless there is universal access to the vaccine, it is not possible to eradicate the pandemic. So that is the sort of multilateralism I'm talking about, and the need to denounce unilateralism and to work within the United Nations as a global village, a global community. But also it is important for us to aid one another. Countries that cannot afford to meet the basic living standards, they need assistance, technical assistance and cooperation. But even then, we need good governance. Countries in the global south, which need support in order to address the questions of poverty and hunger and insecurity, must practice good governance, respect for human rights and democracy. In so doing, we eliminate the possibilities of conflict and lack of peace. So if some of those factors are embraced, then we are likely to see peace among nations, but within also families and within communities.
There is an argument that the COVID-19 provided a way for national governments to reemerge in positions of leadership with the world engaged in a common struggle, where some people had seen the national governments stepping back from their role, handing authority over to large corporations. The argument, for example, in the United States, where government is seen by many people as a problem. But COVID-19, was it a chance for government to reemerge and for cooperation internationally to grow? Do you think that happened at all to any degree?
I think it did, because going by experiences, you find in countries where there was good leadership, where governments, asserted themselves and took leadership and provided proper leadership, they were able to contain the pandemic rather early, especially those Scandinavian countries. And also, I am aware that even in the United States, there was a reemergence of some sense of nationalism. But that seemed to have been the initial response, where countries were looking inwards and looking forward to their government solve the problem, until they realized that they could not do it alone. There was need for common action. And that is when we started realizing, larger impact, as of course evidenced today with the COVAX facility and others. And as more and more countries understood the necessity to cooperate and share vaccines, now we see, to a large extent, nations coming to grips with the pandemic. So I think it is partly true that it was an opportunity for nations to reemerge with their national governments. But I think it was also to some extent false for them to assume that they could handle it on their own. And they realized in the final analysis that they could only do so with international cooperation. So it was not easy, I imagine, for countries, but I think the whole idea of international cooperation stands true to date, that indeed the vision for which the United Nations was established remains true up to today.
We talk a little bit about your experience in Uganda, your what you have seen in your human rights work there in your own country. Are there lessons to be learned from what you have accomplished that could be more widely understood, that would be beneficial?
I engaged with human rights right from the university, and I have been an activist ever since. There are certain lessons that I've learned that would be helpful. When COVID struck, it was a nightmare here. As our government struggled to impose standard operating procedures, rights violations also took center stage. As the state became more repressive and oppressive and took advantage of the situation. So one had to rethink, how do I deal with this in a context where rights are abridged? Because the state took advantage of COVID and abridged rights. And certainly promoting rights was not easy. So one had to adopt new thinking, new approaches, and new models in order to promote the ideals we all cherish. The other lesson I have learned is that we need peer-to-peer exchange. Over the last 3 decades, I have had the benefit of interfacing with many across the world, and I have learned lessons from others, and I have replicated them in my own situation, and I've found that as a very useful lesson. But besides that, I have also noted that states are very important players in realizing these values, norms, and aspirations. And we must constantly work towards good leadership. That without good leadership, it's almost impossible to attain these values. So part of the discourse involves agitating, advocating, and working towards a good leadership. And in that regard, one major lesson I've learned in my human rights work is the importance of elections and electoral democracy. Electoral democracy is so important. If you don't have free, fair, and inclusive elections, and you do not churn out leaders who are pro-people, who have an agenda for common humanity, it's very difficult for you to advance these values. And of course, another lesson is how to deal with militarism. I see problems in Myanmar. I see problems in, I think in Eastern Europe, mainly Eastern Europe, even in South America and West Africa. I see a lot of militarism and how it has subordinated civil rights to the altar of their political expedience. I've realized that international financial institutions can be a key catalyst in promoting democracy and good governance and sustainable development, or in the alternative, can be a major player in undermining progress and development. And I think those are important lessons in my human rights discourse, and I have been able to take advantage of them. And I think elsewhere, they are applicable. They are as applicable in Uganda as they are applicable in any other society or social political setting.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in a short time. I'd like to ask, perhaps as we wrap up, where do you feel there is hope? Where do you feel there are significant concerns? Are you in the end, are you a hopeful person going forward? Or do you find too many problems lined up ahead of us? This is a difficult
As I appreciate that we are faced with daunting challenges, I believe in hope, because without hope, you are dead. You see, you must always live with hope. Hope is important for every scenario, whether you are facing a pandemic like COVID-19, whether the economy is crumbling, whether you cannot make ends meet, whether you are facing a catastrophe, you must be hopeful. So I definitely see hope. One, that the world will overcome the pandemic sooner or later, because it has rediscovered itself that with global cooperation, international cooperation, and multilateralism, we can overcome this pandemic. Because what we now need is global vaccination, universal vaccination, and definitely we are good to go. I have also hope that as the youth, the digital revolution takes shape, we are going to embrace more and more ways of working online like we are doing now. If we were to have this meeting like now, we would be spending a lot, but you can see we are achieving our end with virtually nothing. You are in your own setting, I'm in my own setting. And the more we embrace universal access to the internet and the digital revolution, I think we are going to reap the benefits of this internet age. I am very optimistic that more and more people will embrace it, and it will also will reduce costs of doing business. But I'm also concerned that the world is not ready. The world is not ready to address the growing problem of unemployment. I think COVID-19 has come with a very big challenge of unemployment. In our world here, almost 80% of our youthful population are unemployed or unemployed. And that causes a serious challenge. It's a real dilemma. And of course, extortion and exploitation. The few who have definitely take advantage of the majority who do not have. And that sense of despondence can actually create a sense of unease among people. So I have hope, as well as I also have fear that the world needs to move faster to create an environment where the youth are gainfully employed. If they are not going to be gainfully employed, then we are likely to see more conflict and more internal disturbances, and even some of these challenges of terrorism. If you look deeply into the question of the problem of terrorism, I think you'll agree with me that it's mainly the youth who tend to be manipulated to engage in terrorism or terrorist activities. And that is a high cost to life of millions of people. And we are seeing this virtually in very many parts of the world. No country is spared. I mean, we saw the other day, Norway faced a similar challenge. I think France has a similar challenge. The US, here in Eastern Africa, there are many problems. There are many instances of terrorism, and it's basically the youth, the unemployed, who are manipulated to engage in these acts. So that causes a bit of fear, but overall, I'm optimistic that together we can overcome.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Human Rights Magazine. The podcast is brought to you by the Upstream Journal. I invite you to consider supporting the program and the magazine with a contribution through PayPal as you explore other episodes.